Right. Hello. Yes, that's become my intro. So everybody kind of wants to do something for SotO release, and I thought, why not talk about something that I was going to look at anyway, which is the Relics. I've gone through that box that everybody got for their level 80 characters that has all of the core relics inside, and made screenshots of them and thrown them into a tier list maker. Now, I haven't actually read them, because today I want to go through that list with you, read their effects together, and then assess if they are useful and where they might be useful. Now, this is just a first impressions, because obviously I don't have the time, or the resources in this case, to test all of them thoroughly. I want to get this out as quickly as possible, so this is just going to be a first impressions with some speculation that hopefully can get you some idea of which of these might be worth picking out of the box. Now, as you can see, the tiers that I made aren't a traditional A, B, C, and so on, because I can't rightfully claim to know which one of these are actually going to be good factually, since, first impressions, haven't tested them. So I've kind of grouped them by content instead. And of course, that's a bit vague because that's not necessarily a mutually exclusive classification, but I think you'll get the idea as we're looking at these. So to go through the tiers here at the top, and this doesn't necessarily mean they're better, it's just, by personal relevance, really. At the top, we have Meta Contender, and these are the ones that I think would be the most likely to show up on sides like Snowcrows. This is for your raids, your strikes, your fractal builds. This is where the previous T6s of, like, Scholar runes and Monk runes and that sort of thing would go. So anything that I think could have meta relevance in that sense, or at least a niche somewhere in that realm, that's going to go here. Next here is open world design. This is the type of thing that you would get recommended for open world. Of course, you can kind of go with whatever in open world, but these are the ones that I think have very interesting applications for open world builds that make them worth using over just, the straight damage buff. And one of the criteria is that they have to do stuff that's not necessarily super accessible elsewhere, across at least most of the classes, because there are some effects that I think the relic slot is just too valuable for, and that would be easier to fit into your build elsewhere, where possible. Next here is competitive design, and this is for things that are pretty clearly meant to be used in PvP and World vs. World. Now, as I often say, I'm a poor source of information for these game modes, because I don't play them, and I don't follow any coverage on them, but ANET often puts out, like, build pieces or whatever that very obviously have effects that are pretty much only relevant in a competitive environment. And whether these are good or not, I cannot be the judge of, but they go in this tier. Obviously, things from the other two tiers can very much have application here, especially here that crossover applies. So I'm just going to be using this for the ones that are super obviously geared towards that game mode and very little else. Then we have the not enough information tier, aka Limbo, because at least from some of the press coverage and the previews, we already saw the interface for the relics, and they did not have skill information present, which means there is going to be relics in here that are just missing crucial information as to how effective they are, and thus I can't possibly assess, so they're just gonna have to go here. And then at the bottom we have straight up bad. I really hope that this tier just stays empty, because these are for the ones that I really can't see having any solid use anywhere. At least not on more than, like, one niche open world build or something. I think there's not going to be a lot of these. I think everything should probably have use, either at least in open world or in the competitive modes, at least in theory. But you never know, and maybe something is just straight up garbage. Just to reiterate this one more time, this is just a first impression, this is just me reading them. I do hope you're getting some information out of this. Maybe you're listening to this while you're exploring the open world yourself. I'm going to try to get this out literally as fast as I possibly can in the middle of a work week, so I do hate asking for this, but it does help. If you could leave a like or maybe subscribe, that would be really cool. And also, because I am trying to save as much time as humanly possible, I actually pre-recorded this intro a couple days early, so if I sound different in a minute, that's why. Future Marin, take it away. Right, thanks, past me. You're gonna have to excuse the slightly misaligned icons. I literally got these from the window sniping tool because that's what I have access to right now. So something I didn't expect them doing was they actually grouped these up by function. So there is a power box, a condy box, a support box, and a survivability box. So we're going to have to go through these by category instead of alphabetically, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I haven't read almost any of these. I've moused over some of them by accident, and most of the effects aren't super long, which is kind of nice, actually. I was kind of hoping I could get through these at, like, one thing per minute. Knowing myself, I will not stick to that. So we're starting off with the Brawler one, and yeah, gain 10% strike damage for 4 seconds when granting yourself protection or resolution. This one's kind of a bit of a yikes, because it has an internal 8-second cooldown, meaning even if you can proc this every 8 seconds on cooldown, it'll only be up half the time. So essentially, it's a 5% damage buff if you can proc the very conditional effect on cooldown. So based on that, we saw the Thief rune in the preview, and because this is going to come up so often, I'm going to reiterate this for a second. Upon striking an enemy with a weapon skill that has a recharge or resource cost, gain 1% strike damage for 6 seconds up to a maximum of 5 stacks, and refresh the duration of all stacks to 6 seconds. This means that after casting 5 skills in 6 seconds, or you even have a bit more time than that, as long as you're casting a skill a second, which is incredibly easy to do because there's no ICD on this, you're gonna just be running around with the 5% damage flat. And I think the 5% damage is kind of the default we're working with now. And so this is probably most likely, maybe I'll go back on that, but this is probably most likely the standard for like power DPS runes. And Brawler is just far too conditional to compete with that. Because even if you compare this to the previous Scholar runes, Scholars were super conditional and often were not as good as they were on like Golem benchmarks, just because in a lot of groups you couldn't meet the 90% health requirement that you needed to get those 5% extra damage. This is incredibly easy to meet. Brawler is super hard to keep up. The question is just, does this have a place in competitive, or does this go in bad? And that depends entirely on if there is another rune that can also fill this role that is easier to proc than Brawlers. And I'm gonna bank on that being the case. Maybe it's even Thief rune, but Thief rune might be a little bit harder to deal with in PvP because you might not want to dump all of your skills up front. There, you might want to save a couple of them. But I don't know how many use cases there are for this outside of maybe Herald. I guess Herald could use this really well because they can actually proc this on cooldown very easily. I don't know. Tentatively, I'm going to stick it in competitive. I'm going to stick it here because like maybe PvP Herald can use this or something. But if we find one that is easier to trigger, then it's going in bad. Citadel. This was also one of the preview ones. After using an elite skill, cooldown an artillery strike on skill target or nearest enemy that inflicts stun. So, cooldown 30 seconds. So, all of the elite ones are going to be a pretty hard sell because those are kind of difficult to use. But I thought this one, seeing it in the preview, was kind of the emblem for competitive design. Because there's basically no use case for this in PvE. Like, your relic slot's gonna be probably too important to use it on something as small as a bit of CC. It'd have to be like a 2-second stun or a like at least flesh golem flip over level CC for this to have any use whatsoever, and it's probably not gonna have that. It could go in the not enough information tier because it literally does not tell you how much CC it does, or rather how long that stun is, but I can't see it being like 2 seconds, which is what it would absolutely have to be for this to be useful in PvE. because there is almost no scenario in which you want to be using an elite skill that is tied to the enemy's break bar that is not in itself, or that you want to be saving your elite skill for the enemy's break bar if it is not in itself a CC skill. Maybe there's a handful of self buffs for open world, but there are just so many easier sources of CC if you're making an open world build. CC is one of the most ubiquitous and easy to come by forms of utility. Using both your relic and your elite usage on this is terrible. However, for competitive, this could be extremely interesting as a sort of engage tool. I have no idea if this is going to be like really good or really meta, but this could have its uses by surprising people by forcing resources like dodges or stun breaks out of people, like right at the start of the engagement with your elite. So I can see this being very useful on certain builds that make good use of that effect. Perhaps like roaming builds or like side noder builds for SPVP. Those I can see using this, but for PvE, absolutely fucking not. Daredevil, after dodge rolling in combat or evading attack, your next attack is guaranteed to be a critical hit. Nope, sorry. I think you heard that. That was my water bottle. Competitive, I think? Maybe? I don't know. I think a lot of these are going to end up here, actually. So the nice thing is this has only a 1 second ICD, and it does count even if you don't actually dodge anything. At least if you're using your actual dodge. If you're using a skill that evades, but you don't evade anything, at least by the wording of this, it wouldn't trigger. But guaranteeing a crit is not that useful of an effect for PvE, at least. Because, you know, getting 100% crit chance, at least with a Source of Fury, is not very difficult. So, yeah. And if you care about crits, then this is something... then that's something you want to be doing. In competitive, where the stats are different and where you can really get some benefit around guaranteeing very specific skills to crit, rather than having to rely on a chance, and you maybe don't want to have the resources or spend your resources on applying Fury to yourself, this could be useful. I think a lot of the very situational relics are going to end up in the competitive tier, just because I can imagine a lot more scenarios in which they are useful there. Deadeye. Gain 10% strike damage for 8 seconds when you use a cantrip skill. There's only 2 classes that even have cantrip. No, 3 classes, Untamed. There's 3 classes that have cantrips: Untamed, Deadeye, and Elementalist. Elementalist basically doesn't use cantrips for PvE. Untamed kind of does, and Rifle Deadeye does. But 8 seconds with accounting for cooldown, I don't know. This might be interesting for Rifle Deadeye, because Rifle Deadeye can, like, cast a cantrip and then have the higher 10% modifier on its sneak attack. Rather than wasting the, like, more consistent 5% on skills it doesn't care about as much. And, of course, the Rifle Sneak Attack loves multipliers. So maybe similar thing could be said about Untamed, but without the cooldown reduction trait in the game, because that got removed. I don't think that's too relevant on Untamed. Ellie really does not like its cantrips, because they're all, like, defensive tools, and that's not worth using your relic slot on. Especially because Ellie loves to spam skills, which means it benefits from Thief Runes even more. I don't know. I think if Brawler is here, it can also go here. No, I don't know. This seems too specific. I thought about maybe including like a super specific niche tier. Maybe that would go there. Yeah, the thing is just Thief Runes is so much better than all of these, even for open world, because this is easy to trigger even still in open world. Because the stacks refresh every time you use a skill, so losing them is very difficult. Like, you have to not cast any skills in 6 seconds. And most two skills of weapons have a cooldown that is lower than that, or can be made lower than that, or you have a weapon swap. I guess maybe in certain open world builds, I'd have to go through everything, but maybe there's certain situations in open world where this is useful over Thief, but yeah, no. Dragonhunter, I hope this is... Oh, no, I'm already seeing the word trap. Enemies hit by your trap skills become hunted by you, increasing your strike damage and condition duration against them by 10% for 5 seconds. There is 2 classes with traps, and that's Ranger and Dragonhunter. Nope. Dragonhunter does not like this. Dragonhunter wants the full 5% all of the time. This is not even, like, negotiable like this was, because, again, Deadeye really loves its multipliers on its sneak attack, but Dragonhunter doesn't really care. It loves its burst damage, but not enough to, like, give it up for extended periods of time, because this is only 5 seconds, which is not a lot. Yeah, you can't space this out to be consistent, or probably, I doubt this can even be used for half uptime. Otherwise, maybe Ranger, like Connie Ranger, could care about this, because they can run, like, a full trap build. I think the full trap build is kind of fun. Like, full trap Connie Ranger is kind of fun for open world, so I'm putting it there. This is very easy to use for short engagements in competitive. Because there you can just kind of space out some of your traps and then have that up for, like, most of a fight if you're playing a bit of a bursty PvP trap build. So they're going to have fun with this. So this would also definitely go in here. But yeah, not coming close to Thief Runes. Relic of Fireworks. Fireworks is a power thing, okay. Upon dealing strike damage using a weapon skill with a recharge time of 20 seconds or more, gain 10% strike damage for 6 seconds, refreshing duration on stack. Oh, this is fascinating. This is actually very interesting. This is maybe the first one that's actually interesting compared to Thief, but I think this depends super heavily on your weapons. I don't know how many weapon skills, like the 4s, there are that are longer than 20 seconds on cooldown. And you'd need, like, at least 2 or 3 of them to be worth it, like, even with weapon swap included. And then you'd have to space these out. So basically, you can refresh this every 20 seconds, every, like, 6 seconds, roughly. Also, question if this accounts for alacrity, by the way. I would assume it doesn't. I'm gonna throw this in Meta Contender because there is probably at least, like, 1 or 2 builds with specific weapon combinations that can make good use of this. There probably is, and that's gonna be really interesting for people to play around with. Also, kind of interesting for open world, maybe. But there, I don't know. I'd still rather have Thief most of the time, I think. Just because this might be a little bit inconsistent, because in open world, you don't necessarily always want a weapon swap on cooldown. Because you kind of care about doing things like staying at range, or staying in melee, or keeping certain things up, whatever. So, yeah. There's probably something that can abuse this very interestingly. So that's going up here. And, yeah, again, it would also be a good engage tool for competitive, potentially. But let's move on to Weaver, and this is another one that's a little bit uninteresting. Upon using a stance skill, gain 10% strike damage for 4 seconds. Yeah, same camp as the rifle one. Rifle one, I already say rifle. The cantrip one, I think it's basically the same effect. No, wait, then the cantrip one lasted longer. Stances, who has stances? Soul Beast, Weaver, and Warrior, I think. Does Guardian have stances? No, I'm confusing stances for like consecrations or shouts or whatever, because the Guardian shouts look like they could be stances. Yeah, none of those would give up this for like thief runes for this. Would anybody care about this in open world? Not with an 8-second cooldown, though they wouldn't, especially because stance cooldowns are often fairly long. So I'm putting this in the same boat as this. I'm trying to think. I think there is definitely classes that aren't covered by the combination of stances, traps, and cantrips, which means I'm leaving Brawler here just because there is situation. But, like, is there a situation in which you would prefer Brawler over Firework? I almost want to say no. Okay, I'm going to leave this in here based on the fact that I don't know enough about PvP to know if there is absolutely no situation in which you would prefer Brawler over Fireworks. Because there's probably things where you do not want, where you like really want to save your weapon skill 5s for specific scenarios, but you have easy access to like protection and resolution, especially on like Guardian. I can imagine this staying relevant there. Right, now I have to switch characters, because this is the one that I pop on the other character. The rest of them are all on the same one. But yeah, I think so far, Thief is unequivocally probably the best power rune. Fireworks is something is going to break Fireworks. I have no idea what's going to break Fireworks. I'm going to put my money on Ellie, just because Ellie automatically has, like, 4 weapon skills that have longer than 20-second cooldown. And I'm assuming this is base cooldown and not accounting for alacrity. So like a catalyst or a weaver might be able to keep this up pretty easily, actually. Could be interesting. These, you can make silly open world builds using these to be quite interesting. I don't think the stance payoff is high enough because there is not enough like low cooldown stances to make this worth it over these two. And then these are all just very conditional. I think this one, and I forget which one this is, but I think I said this on this one too. Yeah, this is the dodge one. I think these are like situationally interesting tools for PvP. And these one are a bit questionable. Like they might turn up on like 1 or 2 builds, maybe. Or maybe they go here. Especially Brawler. I'm totally unsure if Brawler shouldn't go down there. Anyway, moving on to conditions, and this is going to be slightly more interesting because we saw Thief Runes in the preview, and Thief Runes became automatically kind of the best one, even in the preview, just because they were the most straightforward pure damage buff. We didn't see one of those force Condi, so I'm kind of going to have to make some guesses as to what the standard is here. Starting with Afflicted. Create a Death Nova at a foe's location upon their defeat that inflicts poison and bleeding, internal cooldown 10 seconds, open world. This is... I'm actually, no, not enough info. This sort of thing is why this tier was created, because it says that inflicts poison and bleeding, and create a Death Nova. Okay, what is the range of this? How long does it stay around? How many targets can it affect? Does this pulse? Is this one explosion? How much poison and bleeding does it do? For how long? Are relics still affected by your stats? So is this affected by your condition duration? These things really should have had skill information on them. They really just, if you mouse over them, should show up with a tooltip of like Death Nova with the exact stats of the skill, applying your gear stats to it. And they don't. And that is possibly the worst part about this. No kidding. I hate that they had the chance to fix this from runes, because runes had this limitation from all the way back in the core days, and this was the chance for them to fix this. So if this is like good, then this goes in open world, because in open world you can proc this relatively consistently off like trash mobs, especially in like big meta events. That could be super fun. But for like in like group content scenarios, this is pretty terrible because you can't like practice consistently at all. This is going to be huge in open world in Wilderness World. I wanted to say this is going to be huge in Wilderness World. Zerging is going to love this or hate it if you're going to be on the receiving end of this, because poison is so important, and triggering this on accident by having just grazed somebody in a Zerg is going to be super easy. So this is absolutely going here, but this also could go here, but that's based on there not being enough information. I think this could also just, if we're going by, maybe this could be useful depending on the skill information. If the poison duration is too short, then it's probably not good in Wilderness World either, despite being such an incredible effect for Wilderness World. So yeah, if the damage is good, great for open world. If the damage isn't amazing, then it's probably still good for like Zerging. Aristocracy. Gain 3% condition duration for 8 seconds when inflicting weakness or vulnerability on a foe up to a maximum of 5 stacks. Whoop. Vulnerability is an incredibly easy condition to access. This can get you 15% condition duration. That's insane. Hold on, let me check how much Nightmare runes, like, if they're changed T6, how much those give you, because that's going to be relevant. Let me see that. 10%. Nightmare runes still give you 10%. But yeah, those two combined giving you potentially 25% condition duration flat out is kind of insane. And vulnerability is incredibly easy to proc on a lot of classes. It's not going to be for everybody. It's probably not going to be the default Kanye rune, but it is going to be very good on the ones that can use this. I don't think, maybe it's good in competitive. This does have a 1 second ICD, so you can't like proc it multiple times off the same skill in like a Zerg situation. But yeah, on like a Conde DPS scale for specific builds, anything that can very easily proc vulnerability, that's potentially insane. Relic of Ice. After using elite skill, yikes, launch icicle at nearby enemies that inflict chilled. Yikes. Cooldown 30 seconds. I almost want to say they're not stupid enough to make something so specific bad in its duration, because if the chill duration here sucks, then this would be worthless. I'm going to put this in competitive because like cold as a status, or cold, not cold, with chill not cold, this isn't Warframe, is only worthwhile in PvP unless your name is exactly Reaper, and if your name is exactly Reaper, then you do not want to be using your thing on a 30-second cooldown bitter chill proc. So like PvE can't make use of this, but I'm just gonna have to assume that they're not stupid enough to make the chill duration terrible. This still depends on a lot of things, like what does launch mean? Is this a point blank AoE? How many targets is this? How much range does this? Is it a point blank AoE, or does it shoot out projectiles? Because if it is projectiles, then can this be reflected? All of these questions that this does not answer and is incredibly frustrating, but I'm just going to assume that they're not stupid enough to make a relic that is this niche, that is this specific, bad in its intended game mode, which is mainly SPVP. Krait. After using an elite skill, yikes, emit a wave of corruption that inflicts damaging conditions. This is as vague as you can be. It doesn't even tell you which conditions. I'm going to assume it's like Bleeding Torment and Poison, because I think that's what the old Krait runes did. But yeah, this is, I think, almost the old Krait T6. The thing is, nobody ran Krait runes for the T6. It had incidental synergy on some builds, which was nice, but you always ran Krait runes for the bleeding duration and nothing else. And the Condi damage, I guess, but like primarily you picked those over like Nightmare. because they gave you maxed out bleeding duration. And when this says damaging conditions, and it doesn't even tell you which conditions, then yeah, this could just as well be a blank fucking line, and we would have about as much information. Relic of Mirage. Inflict torment on for 6 seconds upon successfully evading an attack. Why does this one have the duration on it and nothing else has the duration on it? Cooldown 1 second, by the way. I don't know. Because this is evading attack and not dodging. So Torment is incredibly good, and there is precedent for things using sigils that inflict torment over more generalized options. Just because Torment is so good, and 6 seconds is pretty long, you obviously can't get this on, like, cooldown, but because you can't guarantee that you proc this even every time you dodge, or every time you would evade on, like, classes that have skills with evades on them, I don't think this is reliable enough to actually be good. And I don't think it has quite the same setup potential as something like the Daredevil runes does for PvP. I'm gonna say that there's probably better things you can pick up, even for, like, Condi damage options, even for PvP, because it's just not reliable enough here. It's certainly not reliable enough for here, because especially there, you actually, in open world, really care about your vulnerability, so, like, this is even easier to proc. I don't know, maybe, but I'm gonna be mean and put it here. Relic of the Necromancer. Fear you inflict causes foes to move 50% slower. I mean, do I even have to say it? This is a relic that was entirely designed for PvP. This has PvP design written all over it. Not worth debating. This gives... I wonder if this stacks with chill. That would be insufferable. I guess you're already feared, so you don't necessarily care. This is kind of like the effect for that Reaper has in one of the minor traits, where you also inflict chill every time you inflict fear, so that they don't run that far away from you. But this, like, extends your CC, and it's a 50% slow, which is hilarious. Something can use this for something stupid, I can already tell. Relic of Nightmare. After using an elite skill, again, yikes, send a Nightmare pulse forward that inflicts fear and poison on nearby enemies. At least this tells us what conditions this is. This is worse than Krait. Also, cooldown 30 seconds. I'm gonna put this in PvP. Like, if either of these, if any of these on elite do conditions things are gonna be good, then it's probably the Krait one. But this one doing what, fear instead? Maybe I would maybe see this as a setup tool, but then, like, why not just use Citadel runes instead, which are a stun on elite skill use, which seems a lot better. I don't know. I'm gonna put this entirely here in competitive design purely because it has the word poison on it, and poison is really, really good in PvP, so yeah, I don't know. Chill nearby enemies when executing a shout skill. Rune of the Reaper. Yeah, again, chill only matters here. Theoretically, you could use this on Condi Reaper, which cares about chill, but much rather have this on Condi Reaper because the Condi Reaper Shroud auto does vulnerability, and that's all I have to say about it. Relic of the Scourge. Upon applying Barrier to an ally, gain 1.5% condition duration for 6 seconds, up to a maximum of 10 stacks. Oh, this is also... Oh, this was 3%. Yeah, okay, so this is also same camp. This is easier to proc than this. On some classes, there's not a lot of them that can use this, but Scourge is one of them. Mechanist is... Or no, Engineer is one of them, now that we have Mace in the core, because Mace... shares Barrier. So This is incredibly easy to proc on Engineer. This might even push Engineer, or this might even push Mace into being the better Condi weapon for Engineer. Maybe. But it's definitely, like, Condi's is so far gonna run one of those two, most likely. Relic of the Sunless. Using an elite skill summons a pool on the target enemy that inflicts poison and cripple. Pool duration scales with the recharge of the elite skill. Cooldown 30 seconds. I mean, yeah, again, if anything, maybe this is not enough information, because maybe this could, with the right elite, pulse a lot of poison. So I'm gonna be nice and put it here, just because we do not have any information of how much poison this actually does, and it's at least worth trying out on some things, maybe. If they, like, can't proc Aristocracy reliably. But, Cripple is, again, nice here. Don't know if it's better than the Fear. I don't know. The Connie runes are a bit disappointing. These ones are kind of insane, these two. But the question is, like, can these two, like, be procced on enough classes that it works out well? Connie might have taken a bit of a hit with this patch for losing these. But on the other hand, I say that, but before this was no good Connie T6 unique bonus anyway, because everyone was mostly using either Nightmare runes or Krait runes, which still exist, and are probably the same thing. So you didn't lose anything on that, and maybe, like, some things used other condition-specific runes that are still gonna benefit from this. So I guess, like, this is maybe also a net gain for some builds. It's a bit weird. This is a bit weird, because both of these are conditional, whereas this is, like, everyone can proc Thief, not everyone can proc Scourge and Aristocracy. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, you didn't lose anything, because before this, there was no really good Condi unique bonus that you're now missing, because you kept the stats on the runes themselves, which was the important part of Condi runes anyway. Right, support. Let's see if Monk runes just come back, because the Monk rune effect is entirely in line with what they've been doing, and, you know, reining in healing is not exactly something they need to be doing. So, yeah. Leadership. Convert up to 3 conditions into boons on nearby allies after using an elite skill. 30-second cooldown. Goes right here. Very nice, very, like, situational support thing. If this had a lower internal cooldown, if this was, like, a 10-second internal cooldown, maybe, that could be kind of interesting as a very, very situational pick in certain fights where there's very high condition damage pressure, but not a lot of flat damage pressure for, like, meta choices. Kind of cute for open world, but I think we're gonna see better ones for that as we go along. But yeah, this is probably very, very nice for PvP, where that's the exact sort of situational thing that you like having on your elite. And converting 3 conditions into boons is pretty good. I'm going to assume this is 5 targets. Oh, this is kind of insane. Okay. Relic of Antitoxin. Outgoing condition cleanses. Remove an additional condition. This can only affect an ally once every 5 seconds. This is still kind of crazy. I'm almost willing to put it here, not as, like, the general default healer rune, but as a potential, actually quite useful utility swap for, maybe that's a bit specific, but I'm thinking of, like, Zera and fights where you actually don't take a lot of damage, but you get a ton of conditions. And sometimes you get, like, 4 stacks of conditions, and a lot of things cleanse, like, 3 conditions, and that gets very frustrating. And where you could, like, pass up on the 10% of the old monk runes, and you would rather have this for more reliable cleanse, or like Slothazor, once you get into the late stages of the fight, and there's like the slublings that keep pressuring everybody with condies, and if you don't necessarily have a pull to deal with them, this would also be quite useful. This is so nice. I'm gonna actually leave it there, not as like the default healer rune, but as just a genuinely really useful utility swap. Obviously completely insane here at like, and this doesn't have a target cap. This is per person. So this in World versus World is nuts. But yeah, this is actually one of the few things where the fact that you can very easily switch relics whenever you want, as opposed to how runes work, where you literally destroy the rune every time you want to swap, where that comes into play and that becomes useful. And I wish there were more runes like this, but I guess outside of the support department, there's not a lot of chances for that. So, yeah. Not the best healer rune, for sure, but something that's probably worth carrying around. Moving on. Relic of Durability. Gain protection and regeneration after using a healing skill. Internal cooldown 15 seconds. Not enough information. This does not list the duration of the protection or the regen. This does not say apply to allies or anything, so I'm assuming this is personal, which makes this useful in open world and in PvP. It would be very useful in open world if this is long enough and it is affected by boon duration, which I'm going to assume it is. But because this has no base duration on it, because this does not tell us how long it is, I'm going to put it in not enough info. Just because if this is too short of a protection duration, if they were too careful with the protection duration because of PvP, then this becomes useless in open world, probably still useful on some competitive builds, maybe at least as a preference choice. But yeah, without knowing the duration of those, not enough information. Relic of Dwayna. Regeneration you apply is 20% more effective. Should I just skip forward to monk runes and see if they still have the healing bonus on it? I'm going to do that. I'm real quick before we continue. I'm going to skip to monk runes for a second. Increase healing effectiveness to allies by 1% for 3 seconds after granting a boon to an ally, up to a maximum of 10 stacks. Cooldown 1 second. Yeah, so monk runes are still the best healing rune. This is, I think, almost exactly the same effect they had before. They maybe have a shorter duration. Oh, but this does not say that it refreshes the stacks, but you pump out so many boons, usually. Because this doesn't say refreshes stacks, I'm gonna leave this here, because there might be 1 or 2 builds that have very slow application of boons, that like do boons in big packets, and that might not be able to keep up monk runes 100% of the time. I thought even those... No, but this monk runes have a 1 second internal cooldown, so it's not like old monk runes where you could pulse 1 boon to 5 targets and you'd instantly have 5 stacks, so you'd always have it up. So there might actually be like 1 or 2 cases of things that maybe like do might in really big packets instead of applying might like 1 at a time as most things do, where that can't 100% keep up monk runes that then benefit from the 20% regen. 20% regen power is also kind of useful in open world, because unlike monk runes, this applies to yourself. So that's kind of fun, but tentatively leaving this here. Going back up to Firebrand. Oh no. Upon using the final charge of a mantra skill, they'll gain 20% boon duration for that effect and 5 seconds after it. So this is absolutely fucking useless in PvE. Like, this is not even useful for open world, because even for open world, this duration is far too short. And even in open world, if you're using mantras, you want to have your boon duration set up so that you don't need this, basically, and can use it for something more useful. I guess maybe exactly Connie Firebrand could maybe care about this, because this maybe No. Even Connie Firebrand doesn't care about this, because even if Connie Firebrand could use this to lower that required boon duration, which generally boon duration has been reduced, like how much boon duration you need on any given support build has been massively reduced over the last like half a year or so. So yeah, even Firebrand doesn't care about this. And I have a hard time seeing this be useful even for 20% boon duration, even PvP. Maybe there are scenarios where this is good in PvP, but this is so specific because there's only two mantras. There's only Mesmer and Firebrand. And Mesmer does not care about this because Mesmer's very few Mesmer mantras even do boons, so you only get like half of the effect. And then you have to squish in all of your boons on the Mesmer after a final charge, which already like requires you to get through an internal cooldown. And doing that mid-fight means you have to recharge your mantra, which is frustrating. And like, it's just no. There, you almost, even if you can use this, I think you don't want to use it just because it's fucking annoying. Relic of the Flock. Grant barrier just yourself and nearby allies after you use a healing skill. Not enough information. Does not tell you how much barrier. Could be interesting for things that have low cooldown heals, like the mantra heal. Those could use this, but this does not tell you how much barrier, so this has to be better than like Monk runes and Dwayna runes. So like Flock is easily down here. If this is like a ton of barrier, at least, or like it's a decent amount of barrier and like scales really heavily with your healing power, then there might be scenarios where this is useful. But I doubt that there is anything where both there is a world in which this is the case, and there is something that can't make good use of Monk runes at the same time. I don't see that happening. At which point, might be better in open world, because obviously Monk runes don't apply to yourself. Could be useful over Dwayna runes. Could obviously be useful in competitive, but without knowing how much barrier this is, cannot be assessed. That's what that tier is for. Hey. Relic of the Herald. Gain 15 concentration for 3 seconds after granting a boon to an ally up to a maximum of 10 stacks. I don't think Anet understands that you don't want conditional boon duration. Conditional boon duration sucks ass. Like, you'd always rather have a conditional DPS increase and be sure that you bring enough boon duration that you always are able to keep up your boons, rather than dealing with conditional boon duration. That just, it's just bad. This is just kind of bad. And the things that could make really good use of this do not need more concentration. I'm thinking of, like, well, Herald, for example, who really does not care to have a lot of concentration. This gives you quite a bit of concentration. This is 150 concentration. It also does not say that it restacks, so that it refreshes the duration on stacking. So this is hard to use, it's incredibly situational, and it makes your boons more inconsistent. Might be neat in World vs. World, where you can very easily apply this in a Zerg, and you can save some stats, and there's maybe use for that. But, yeah, no. Relic of Mercy. This is one of the ones I moused over earlier. Revive allies 20% faster and with 30% more health. That can lead to... The old Runes of Mercy already did some very, very funny things in PvP. This would be hilarious if we could use this with old Heal Scourge, and if this applied to like skill reses, so that every time you res somebody with a skill, they get up with like 50% health or more. That would be insane on old Heal Scourge. But old Heal Scourge no longer exists. So this does very funny things in PvP, and I don't know if they are good, but they are very funny. Relic of the Pack. Grant super speed to nearby allies up and using an elite. 30 seconds cooldown. Doesn't even tell you how much super speed. I don't even know how good super speed is in PvP. I just straight up don't know. Because last time I actually played PvP actively, super speed was on almost nothing. There was like 3 skills that did super speed to allies, so I have no idea. This doesn't tell you how much super speed. It's a 30-second cooldown. Not that good of an engage tool compared to something like Citadel runes. I'm gonna put this in bad. I'm just gonna put this in bad. Yeah. Anything that's like conditionally maybe PvP and ends up in bad, chalk that up to me not knowing PvP very well. Then, Relic of the Trooper. Remove a condition from an effective ally after using a shout skill. This is the exact same effect that it was before. Was used in PvP, will still be used in PvP. I think in Wilderness World specifically, there's like, what is it? I think Guardian runs this. Yeah. Exact same effect as before. Stays here. Relic of the Zephyrite. Summons a crystal that applies protection and resolution to allies after using elite skill. Crystal duration scales with the recharge of the elite skill. This is the reason the not enough info tier exists. When I had a small rant when the preview was put out, listing all of the things that this does not tell you about the skill that you would need to understand if it's good or not. And it's the exact same things that I listed earlier with the Afflicted runes, where, like, how long is it baseline, even if you don't care about the elite skill and, like, the additional cooldown from the elite skill? Because what is it at 30 seconds? How much duration do the boons have? How frequently does it pulse? Does the crystal move? What is the range of the crystal? Like, we can assume that this does not ever let you do solo protection uptime. Even maybe at 100% boon duration, which I would doubt is a thing anyway, on like builds that would care about this, because I think every single healer, at least every relevant healer, has an easier source of protection. So the people that would care about this is boon DPS builds that would like the utility of being able to do protection. Stuff like Mesmer, for example. Chrono would love an access to protection because that's something they just do not have in their kit. And even if they don't use it by default, it would be really nice to just have the option to do that. But I have my doubts that this would be good enough to let you do that on its own, on like a boon duration that Chrono would actually like to be running. So yeah. And there's like Alacrity Mirage would have a really easy time proccing this, for example. But if you don't know the duration, that's just not enough information. And I think even for PvP, lacking the information of how the crystal works exactly, I don't know. Somebody has to try this, and maybe it goes here. I doubt it's ever going to be here. Maybe it's good in open world, because protection is nice, and protection duration can be an annoying stat to work with. So, like, maybe it's useful here, but this just does not give you enough information. So, I'm going to assume, we're going to go through survival in a minute. I'm going to say that these are the runes that, if you want to pick up the ones for your, like, current raid builds or whatever, these are the ones that are most worth looking at. I think Thief runes and Monk runes are the two, like, clear tops that most things are going to run, like healer builds and power builds. And then, like, maybe wait on picking your condition rune until, or rune, relic, maybe wait until picking your condition relic till people have tried these. It might even end up being like Krait runes or something, but yeah, I think those are the strongest contenders. And then there's maybe going to be niche cases for Fireworks and for Dwayna, and Antitoxin is just nice to pick up. If this ends up not being incredibly expensive, if this ends up at like a gold or something, then absolutely do pick this up. Just to have it if you're gonna play healers, just because it's gonna come up. It's gonna come up at some point, I promise you now. Right, but I think nothing's gonna join this rank just because survivability is not generally useful for like a PvE meta sense. But I think a lot more things are gonna now be joining open world, because obviously a lot of these things that are up here are also useful in open world. but a lot of things that are like survivability based and good in open world are not good up here. So this is where that tier is going to fill out. Relic of the Adventurer, gain 50% endurance after using a heal skill, PvP rune, not worth talking about in detail. This is 20-second cooldown, by the way. Very situational PvP rune, but definitely one of those that, like, if you can make good use of the effect, is really cool, especially on classes that have synergy with dodging. So something like a Mirage, which already only has like one dodge bar, is going to enjoy this. So yeah. And this being like disconnected from adventurer runes themselves is really nice. Relic of the Cavalier. Oh, this one's funny. Grant yourself Aegis, quickness, swiftness, resistance, and might when striking an enemy from your mount's engaged skill. I mean, literally not usable anywhere else, right? You can't use mounts anywhere. I guess you can use mounts in World vs. World, but this was obviously made for open world. That's why the list of things you get is so long and includes stuff like fucking Aegis and quickness. Hilarious in open world, especially if you run around with like a decently high amount of boon duration. Absolutely hilarious. Don't think it's gonna see much use anywhere else. I mean, can't see use anywhere else. Maybe World vs. World, but yeah. This one's gonna be a very fun open world pick. Rune of the Centaur, gain stability when you use a healing skill. Same deal as Adventurer. 20-second internal cooldown. You will absolutely have better sources of stability for your open world build, but stability anytime is good for PvP. So yeah, does not tell you the stability duration though, which is very frustrating. So like, could go here, but I think just based on the effect, totally goes there. Relic of the Chronomancer, gain quickness when you're using a well skill. Right. This is gain quickness, not grant quickness. So this is personal quickness duration, which means it's worthless for meta content. Because like, even if Scrapper wanted to use this, which I probably think it would rather use FIFA runes most of the time, it can't, because this is just personal duration. So nice to do, maybe easier uptime on like Scrapper in open world, but that's about it. I don't even know if this is good in competitive at all, because like, unfortunately this also does not tell you how much quickness, but like, yeah, I have a hard time seeing how with this many options of like situational good relic picks for competitive, you want to pick the thing that gives you, that you have to build around with a ton of welds to give you personal quickness uptime. Relic of the Defender. Heal for 5% of your maximum health after blocking an attack. If you block again within 5 seconds, you heal 1% less each time, down to a minimum of 1%. Cooldown 1 second. Eh? Wait, hold on. If you block again within 5 seconds, oh, the cooldown 1 second got me confused. Open world? This one's really funny with things that have long blocks on them. I'm thinking like Chrono Shield makes this very, very funny. It's also very easy to practice multiple times depending on where you're fighting. Whereas this is like a very funny sustain thing. Also probably really, really, really good in World vs. World. Like good in both of these. Kind of more funny for open world. But yeah, it's a cool sustain rune for sure. Relic of Evasion. Gain vigor for 5 seconds after evading an attack. Cooldown 1 second. Vigor is Vigor useful in open world? I don't think Vigor is useful enough in open world to compare to like some of the other options. I think there's probably better options. So I'm gonna put this here because this does give you basically permanent vigor in PvP. Kind of. Especially on things that can evade a lot. Yeah, because this is evade and attack, not on dodge. So this can be done basically permanently on things that have a lot of evades and only has a 1 second ICD, so you can sometimes trigger it multiple times off like the same skill. I'm thinking like the thief, the dagger storm skill that like has you evading for a whole bunch of time, which then gives you vigor, which then gives you a ton of vigor. Which then lets you dodge more, which Daredevil will love, because Daredevil does not have an easy source of vigor as far as I remember. Which then triggers acrobatic stuff, and just, yeah, this is absolutely going to be very good on very specific competitive builds. I don't think it's worth running for open world, just because there's probably better effects to be using defensively than getting yourself bigger. Relic of Resistance. Gain resistance gain resistance for 5 seconds after using an elite skill. Very conditional PvP rune. This being 30-second cooldown makes this at most 10 seconds. Conditional on permanent elite usage. Not good for open world, not good enough. Resistance is already not a good boon in open world, or just in PvE in general, because you would much rather be cleansing than you would be using this. So, like, instead of using this, you could use whichever the cleanse one was. I forget what it is. I think it was this one. The one that leadership that removed conditions. You would much rather be using this over this, like 99% of the time. I might even put this down here just because leadership has the exact same amount of cooldown, and this only gives you 5 seconds of resistance, which not only does it not completely get rid of the effects, resistance can also be stripped. So, like, I feel like leadership is so much better than this. Also, this and this looks the same, and that's bad. In it, please. Relic of Speed. Increasing movement speed by 66% when under the effect of swiftness. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I don't know how fast you actually end up going. But I think, doesn't this essentially give you permanent super speed if you can have permanent swiftness? That's hilarious. Not good for open world, not worth using in open world, but definitely, like, can let you cheese some shit in PvP. Oh, my voice is giving up. Relic of the Warrior. Weapon swap recharge time is reduced by 25%. Why is this in survival? Why is this in survival? This actually sounds really good. So, this might even go up here. Because this is now detached from... This was before on Warrior Runes, and the stats on Warrior Runes were terrible. And so nobody used them. But, like, this could never be competitive with Old Scholar Runes, or, you know, the easier to use choices like Eagle Runes, I'm sorry. Because it was attached to Warrior Runes, which were just not good. But now that you no longer have that problem, you can just have this effect standalone. There might be, like, 1 or 2 builds that can actually make use of this that have, like, short enough cooldowns where this matters. I'm not sure. Maybe this is being too generous. It's like, again, I thought about having, like, a super conditional tier where, like, there was maybe 1 or 2 builds that can make use of this in the right circumstances, because obviously this is then still competing for Thief and Aristocracy stuff. But, like, maybe there's a rotation that uses this. I can imagine there being a rotation that uses this now that it's no longer attached to Warrior Runes. I'm being very generous with this. I was very mean with some of these. Like I think Mirage. I think I was very mean with. I think this was Mirage. This one I'm being very generous with. And then Water. Cleanse the condition from yourself and nearby allies after using a heal skill. That same campus trooper of conditional PvP rune. It's nice. Yeah, if you're in PvE and you care about condition removal, you would rather pick your healing skill that has condition removal on it, because that is not a hard thing to find. Pretty much every class has one of those. So yeah. I don't know. I don't want to go through all of this again. This is being very nice. I think I was very harsh on, like, I think the Mirage runes, where were Mirage runes? Maybe I want to move those around for a second. Yeah. Inflict 6 seconds of torment after successfully evading an attack. I don't know. I'm going to keep it here just because. I said so. But yeah, that's going to be it. I think this has gone over... Oh yeah, this is an hour long. So if you made it through this, I think this is one of those like podcasty style videos. I'm gonna have very little editing on this. I'm not even gonna put music behind this, just because I think if it's an hour long, it would get very annoying. But if you made it through this, thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying SotO. I hope you're maybe watching this while exploring the open world or something. And I hope these rune prices are not going to be... I said runes again. I hope these relic prices are not going to be too expensive, because it would be nice to have a bunch of them. My voice is gradually giving out. I don't know if you've noticed. So, thank you for watching. If you made it through all of this, well, thank you, and goodbye.